Welcome everyone to the Thursday Elite Zoom training. Today, we had a special request from an agent who wanted to learn a little bit more about how the underwriting works for Americo Financial. So she said that one of her clients, and I'll give you the information. So this client is 51 years old, female, out of Washington State. And she has diabetes and she has high blood pressure. So the diabetes was diagnosed around when she was 40 years old and just takes pills. Blood pressure, it was after 30, so that's good too. And she was looking for a term product, and Americo 100 is the one that we're looking at. So the Americo 100, term 100, it's Americo's term product that is kind of the basic term that comes with living benefits. And let me just show you on the screen here. So Washington State, it's 51. So let's go to the instant decision term series and illustration. Female, term 100. So agents sometimes get confused between these two. Term 125 just means that if you choose this one, if the client passes away by an accident-related death, then family gets 25% higher death benefit than the natural cause death. When you do the term 100, the natural cause death and the accidental death pays exactly the same. So this is the more basic version of that. You do get a higher commission on the term 125, but the pricing is also a little higher for the clients. Okay. And then the CBO means the cashback option. So the client will get 100% of the money back if the client does not pass away. And then CBO 50 just means that if the client doesn't die, they get 50% of their money back. So it was just half of the money back. And the pricing is a little cheaper monthly. Okay. Now we're talking about the term 125. And when she applied for this application, what happened was the underwriting questions came up and it asked about different health issues, right? And one of the things that came up was client has diabetes, and client said put yes on that question. And then she also put that she has a blood pressure question. When you are doing the application, and client might not tell you everything all at once, so she disclosed the diabetes up front. But she said that blood pressure, she doesn't really have it, and she hasn't taken medication for a very long time. So, as an agent that is pretty new, she thought, oh, since it's been a while and she says she doesn't get prescribed with medication, she only put that yes answer on the diabetes question on the application. So, what happens with Americo is that when you put no to a question like high blood pressure, has the client ever been diagnosed with high blood pressure? And when you put no, it's going to flag it. It's going to have a red around it and say, unfortunately, the answer does not match the record and the MIB of the client. So that means that something in the MIB, their Medical Information Bureau, is showing that client has the blood pressure. Even if it was a long time ago, the question actually asked, have you ever been diagnosed with high blood pressure? So even if it was 10 years ago, we have to put yes on that question. Does that make sense? So when she put no, it said, unfortunately, due to the answer is conflicting with what's in the MIB, we cannot give her a coverage. So when that message comes up, it's very important that you go ahead and switch it to yes, because we have to align with the MIB, especially Americo instant decision products. They're trying, the only reason why they don't have to do blood work, urine work, and an extensive underwriting is because They're basing it on the MIB, and MIB consists of really two, three major information. So if you want to write it down, medication. So prescribed medication history. Prescription history is on the MIB. So if a client was prescribed with a certain medication, it will show up. It will show up the blood pressure, diabetes, or any prescribed medication will show up there. And because of that reason, Americo underwriting system searches their MIB once the client does the initial signature on the EAP. Then it gives us the authority of the HIPAA. So then the computer is searching their MIB, looking for a reason if their client should be declined or client still should be approved. And when that initial check ends and they found something that it's just not insurable, let's just say they found some medication that is treating like bipolar or schizophrenia or some really serious narcotic medication or really severe pain medication that can be also opioid, things like that, then Americo's system will say, oh, I see a medication that we do not take, then it will shut it down. And that's when you see on the top left corner of the application, it says, unfortunately, client cannot qualify. And then you get a message and you stop the application right there and you withdraw the app. But if the initial underwriting came back pretty good and there was nothing to really decline the client, then you get a green message on the top left corner that says, oh, client is, could qualify for up to $450,000 in coverage, and it'll show you a little message. Or if it's a final expense product, you can get up to $50,000 of coverage. So that means that initially through their MIB, there was nothing to really decline the client. So going back to the question on the EAP, on the underwritings, it says, hey, have you ever been diagnosed with blood pressure? Even if the client says, hey, no more, because the question asks, have you ever been diagnosed? The answer will be yes on that question. If you put no, the app gets withdrawn and you can't get them a coverage. Then you just switch to yes and just explain to the client because client's gonna be like, oh, I don't have blood pressure. Then say, hey, the question is, have you ever been? You told me that you lost about 50 pounds and before you had it maybe 10 years ago, it will still show up. And the question asks, have you ever been diagnosed with high blood pressure? So we do have to put yes. But this is gonna give you a chance to potentially qualify for this plan. So sometimes agents see a no, they put a no because client didn't disclose that. And then now it's saying that unfortunately they cannot get a coverage. Then they're like kind of like uh, freaking out a little bit. They're like, what do I do here? So always change it back to a yes on that question. And then it's going to ask some extra questions right below that. It's going to say, was it diagnosed in the last 6 months? And that answer should be no, because it's been diagnosed more than 6 months. And if you put yes in that question, there's a really high chance client gets also denied because blood pressure, they're looking for well-controlled blood pressure clients. So if it was last 6 months, they don't have enough data to say that it's being well controlled or not. So if they're asking that question, you should put no. And then if it's asking, hey, are you taking more than three medications for the blood pressure? If you put yes, most likely the client's going to be declined because they're thinking, wow, they need to really take multiple medication to control that blood pressure. Maybe it's not being controlled properly. So there might be some issues really with the client. So then that answer should be no. Right. So just and these are the things that's hard to figure out when you're just getting started with this business because you don't know much about the underwriting side. But the key is anytime you do an Americo e-app, and if they say, oh, the answer doesn't match the record, then you just switch it to the other answer. Because if you don't, it'll be an automatic decline. So just always be aware of that. So I wanted to just show you just real quick process of that. So client wanted at least 150,000 and a 20-year plan. And these are some of the things you can add, but I will say the disability income rider, this allows the client to able to get a disability income up to 1 year or up to 2 year in case client's disabled. This you can add, but the underwriting is a little more strict with this rider. Okay, so just be aware of that. So client can be approved with a term, but client can be declined with a disability income, depending on like there's some history of maybe surgeries or painkillers or height and weight or a bunch of different reasons. So just be aware of that. It's a different underwriting. There's a little more stricter underwriting for that. And waiver premium, that just means that the client, if they were to be disabled, then they don't have to pay a premium anymore during that time. So this is a really unique thing. So if they're disabled, they don't have to make any premiums anymore and the policy continues. So these two have a separate underwriting for those asking for disability income, right? And when you go down, the premium is 120 for the 150,000, which is pretty affordable for the client. And then when you go to start EAP, and this is where you're going to fill out the basic information. And one of the things that you should always remember is that with the Americo, it's not a live underwriting where you can talk to an underwriter and try to explain a situation. No, they really have a very simple structure already in place that says, hey, these are the guidelines. If these medications show up in the MIB, they will not take them. If they had this situation, they will not take them. And they're very simple in that regard. But if it's like a cancer is no good for Americo and Mutual of Omaha. So no matter, even if it was 20 years ago, I wouldn't go with Americo because that'll be wasting your time and the client's time. So these are the things that you should learn in terms of the underwriting guide. But it's very important that you're understanding the client's information that they give you. It might not align with what the client actually has in their record. And I always try to give the client the benefit of the doubt, but the truth is, sometimes clients will tell you only the things that they want to tell you. And sometimes clients actually tell everything that they know, but they were not aware of some things that's in their record. So it could be both ways. Okay. But what I do is I don't make them feel like they're lying to me or anything. I just say, hey, Mary, it seems like there's a little more information in your record than what you have shared with me. Can you think of anything else? Have you had any other medication or illnesses in the past that maybe you don't have it anymore? And that tends to have the client to think a little harder, and they tend to maybe remember some of the things. So we just had a scenario, not a scenario. We had a client we were just talking to, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I lost 150 pounds. I feel great. I have no issues, all that good stuff." But later found out that he has cerebral palsy and he just brings it up nonchalant. He's like, "Hey, I have cerebral palsy." And by that time already, the client was already declined. And I couldn't understand why the client was being declined, but later it came out. So it just, as an agent, as the insurance professional, it is our, kind of job to do our due diligence and try to figure those out. And then once we get that information and, oh man, this is not going to work, then we can go ahead and based on the new information you gather from the client, then we can switch to a different product that's going to actually qualify them for it. And then nowadays, it's really hard to keep a secret. MIB, all the information that you shared with your doctor, all the answers you put in a health insurance or life insurance application, all shows in the MIB. So we talked about the three things in the MIB. One was the prescription medication. So prescription history is going to show up. The other thing that's going to show up is if the client has done an application for a health insurance license, I mean, health insurance or a life insurance, and they put yes or no to health questions, that becomes coded and that code show up in their MIB. So let's just say the code for diabetes was DX4 as an example. Then when the client put yes on a diabetes question on a previous application they did 5 years ago, it's going to still show up today because that was coded back then in the MIB and it's going to trigger that. So it's really hard to lie on the application for that reason. The third thing that could show up on the record is they can also see your previous application, not application in terms of all their name and their social and things like that, they can see who you applied with in terms of coverage. Maybe it was Mutual of Omaha. Maybe it was Foresters Financial. Maybe it was Primerica. Whatever that is, when they apply, it shows up and said, hey, they did had some kind of an application activity back in 2022 in April. But one thing that they don't know is if they were actually approved or denied. That does not show up on the MIB. So that's why when you do an application, sometimes the underwriter comes back and says, "Hey, it seems like there was some activity with American Amicable back in 2011. Was that policy approved, or what is the status of that policy?" So that just shows you they don't know the results of that. They don't know if they were declined or approved, but they at least know that they had an activity. So the reason why they do that is because if the client was continuously denied by multiple companies, then what is it? It's a red flag, right? They're like, man, all these companies don't want to take him. Most likely, I don't want to take him. It's kind of that situation. So it just gives them a little better idea of the overall client's history of what they have applied for and not. But I'll tell you this. Unless the client states, hey, I was actually denied with a certain coverage, I will not put yes on the application question that says, hey, have you ever been denied or rejected by insurance company for a coverage? Because once you put yes, they're going to have a little bit more doubt and wanted to go into more detail of why they were declined. And when you put yes on that question, the chance of them being declined gets higher. Okay? So just be aware of that. And these are the little things that happens in the background when the application is being submitted. And when it comes to the underwriting, the reason why I love companies like Americo and Mutual of Omaha is that when you do the initial signature in the first 5 minutes of the application, they will tell us if the client will qualify or not qualify based on their MIB. They'll search it and see if there's a reason for decline. And it will come back and say favorable or not favorable. It will tell you. Or Americo, it'll just stop the application and not let you continue, or they'll let you continue if the client's MIB is okay. And even if the client gets no, you should not continue with the application because we cannot make, offer you any coverage. That is okay because that's not a decline. It's not a decline like you did a full blood work, urine work, submit an application, and you got declined. It's not that type of decline. So it's not as of a harsh decline on their record as well. So that's why I prefer to do a non-medical instant decision type of product because you're not affecting the client's insurability in the future. If you get them a flat out decline after doing blood work and urine work and they found some protein in their urine or they found they have some cancer, whatever that is permanent. When they did the blood work, urine work, now you're an open book. And what's in their MIB? Every time you do an application, it will follow you for the rest of your life. So people ask, "Oh, isn't it like more expensive or isn't it?" But always remember, just showing the cheapest price is not the best because if you show the cheapest price, but the client gets declined and now client has a permanent information on the MIB that's saying that, oh, client had this thing in the blood work, urine work, and now the client cannot get a coverage. So I prefer to be not as invasive with all those things, evasive with all their information and put a ding on their record. I'll rather just do an underwriting based on what the client tells me and just on their current MIB of what they actually have in their record so far. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, Nora, what if doctor advised the patient to stop taking medication? Is it reported? Yeah, Nora, that's a great question. If the doctor has advised the patient to stop taking medication, yes, it could stop showing as a renewed prescription in the future dates, but it still shows the initial time that they were prescribed with that medication that they were prescribed. So it will still show up and could affect their insurability. So when the question says, have you ever been diagnosed with diabetes? Even if the client has not been diabetic for 20 years, it still will show because he was diabetic and was prescribed medication 20 years ago. My husband was prescribed high blood pressure. We never picked up, but still got declined. Yeah, exactly. When it's prescribed, it will show up on the record. And if the doctor put that in there, that client has an alcohol use or alcohol abuse, it can show up as a code too. So sometimes clients are, it's really unfortunate because the client is being honest to the doctor and sharing everything, and then on the record they say, "Hey, might have an alcohol problem," and now client cannot get a coverage. So just be aware of what you tell your doctors as well, because they will put it in there. Oh, you're being depressed. Oh, you might have thought potentially you had a thought of maybe ending your life. That shows up. Oh, suicidal thoughts, and now that becomes a code and completely destroys the client's insurability too. So just be aware of that. Alima, go ahead.
Hey, thanks, Sean. I had an incident actually just this past
Uh,
weekend
yeah.
with application. The client had standing insurance,
Mm-hmm.
and when we listed, I think I checked off the no because we had talked about not listing that.
Yeah.
But I think this was Americo. They actually came back and said, "We show that are you sure? Like basically, are you sure there's no coverage here?" And I'm wondering if
Uh-huh.
that's, do they know that they have existing coverage once the coverage is in place for a certain period of time, or is it just them still inquiring, basically seeing that application activity and question?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. So the answer is because I looked at multiple MIBs. I reviewed them myself, trying to see, and it does not say client currently has a coverage. But what it could happen, Alima, is that in the previous applications that they with another agent that you didn't do, they ask, "Hey, do you have any existing coverage on the application?" And client says yes and puts National Life or Foresters or whatever. Then that information could be in the MIB in that regards. But just for applying, it will not show if the client got approved, has it still, active or had it canceled. They can't see that part. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So I wanted to show you something. Let me let me minimize this a little bit. I think the screen is too big. I can't see. Yeah, let me just show you something. So the underwriting for the term and IUL is pretty much the same. But I wanted to also, the question on the application is, the same. So I wanted to show you something. So this is the app that I just pulled out for Americo. So they ask a bunch of different questions. Now, when you go to the second page, asking questions like, have you ever been diagnosed with heart attack, coronary artery disease? And if any of these questions are answered yes, it's an automatic decline with Americo. Just be aware of that. Okay. And on the other part, on the number 9 question, these questions, for example, if it said in the 10 years, but let me just say something. Even if it says 10 years on the application, if the client was showing diabetes medication being prescribed, even if the client never took it out of the bottle and they keep it in like a drawer or something, it was still prescribed. So is there a way that insurance company can really know if you really took it out of the bottle or not? They can't base it on that, right? There's no way we can figure that out unless we have a security camera watching them. So really, the only way they can base it on is based on the if it was prescribed, right? Because doctor would have prescribed, a medical professional would have prescribed for you to be prescribed with that medication. So as an example, diabetes question. So it says diabetes was the initial diagnosis within the past 6 months, right? Um, this one, yeah, just don't confuse the line. So this is asking diabetes in any form or pre-diabetes or elevated sugar. That's the yes answer. Was your initial diagnosis within the past 6 months? Answer is no. right? If you put yes, it's a decline. Was your original diagnosis given prior to age 35? If the diabetes was diagnosed at 34, then client can be declined. If you put yes on this question, it can be declined. So I would have not even started this application in the first place. Does that make sense? So that would be a no. It says, how is your diabetes currently treated? Oral medication, non-insulin injectable. This is another trick question. Wegovy, Ozempic is not an insulin. Be aware of that. It is not. It's a GLP-1. It helps you to produce more insulin naturally from your body. It does not, it's not an insulin itself. So I had agents who put oral medication and insulin thinking that Wegovy and Ozempic is insulin and client gets declined because Americo does not take insulin clients. So just be aware of that. It says non-insulin injectable. It's talking about things like Wegovy, and there's a bunch of now, like Wegovy, Ozempic. There's many, many out there. But then you just click on this. When in doubt, click on this. Okay. And then diet and exercise could be also a good answer. If the client really is not being prescribed with any medication and maybe it's on the kind of like the pre-diabetes. This is another trick question. You say on it says including pre-diabetes. Pre-diabetes it's a gray area. Pre-diabetes can be like client was told by the doctor, hey, you have a elevated blood sugar level this time. Your A1C is about 5.9. So like you're getting close to that diabetes range. You should just control your, diet and exercise a little, walk a little more. That's a one thing. But if the doctor was told that he's pre-diabetic, but gets prescribed with metformin or diabetic medication or blood sugar controlling medication, then it's underwritten same as a diabetic. Because how would the insurance know if the client is pre-diabetic, diabetic, if they're being prescribed with the same medication as a diabetic? There's no way. So if the client says pre-diabetes, then it's safer to put yes on the question. If the client says, hey, I never had a diagnosis, I never was prescribed with medication, not taking it out of the bottle, but never was even prescribed by the doctor of any type of medication, then maybe you can put no on the question for the pre-diabetes and diabetes. Okay, so if they were prescribed with something and they only took for a week, still, you're going to put yes because it's diabetic, and I'll just click on oral medication there. Now, within the past 3 months, have you taken more than two medication prescribed by a medical professional to control your blood sugar level? This should be no. If you put yes, most likely client will be instantly declined. They don't want the client to be taking more medication than two. So like three or more medication to control one thing. It's not really being properly controlled. In the past 6 months, have you had an A1C reading of more than 8? Or has a licensed member of the medical professional told you that your diabetes is uncontrolled? When you put yes on this question, it's an automatic decline because A1C higher than 8 means that even if they're taking medication, it is not being really controlled. So that's not a good thing. And if the doctor is telling the client diabetes is not uncontrolled, it's not a good answer. So that will be a decline. So you put no on that question. Have you been treated for cellulitis, neuropathy, or amputation, or either of your? Yeah, so that should be no. Hypertension. Let's talk about blood pressure. This is the originally what I wanted to talk about is hypertension is blood pressure, high blood pressure. Was your initial diagnosis within the past 4 months? So the first question is, do you have hypertension? We have to switch the answer to what? Yes. When we put no, it came up and said, unfortunately, your answer is not matching your MIB. So then we have to switch it to a yes. Was your initial diagnosis within the past 4 months? They're trying to see if they had it long enough to see if it's being controlled. So if you put yes, client can be declined. So you put no. Was your original diagnosis given prior to age 30? High blood pressure diagnosed before age 30 is a decline. So if you put yes, it's a decline. So we put no. Are you currently taking more than 3 medications prescribed by a licensed member of the medical profession to control your high blood pressure? This is exactly more than three. So now that's four medications to control just high blood pressure. That's not controlled, really. So if you put yes on the question, it's a decline. So do you see that? Yeah, there is some common sense, but the questions can be quite tricky, especially as a newer agent who's not experienced. So I'm just letting you know Americo's purpose for Americo's application purpose. If the client said, "Oh, I'm healthy, I have nothing," but the diabetes questions you answer no, and it says, "Oh, it's a wrong answer because the application, the answer does not match the MIB, his MIB, the Medical Information Bureau," then you have to switch it back to a yes to be considered because they're seeing something in the record like a diabetic medication and some blood sugar level related medication or diagnosis or a code that the doctor said, oh, this person is diabetic. So just be aware of that. If you leave it at no, it's gonna shut the application down and you cannot continue anymore. Just by having a diabetes does not decline you. Just having a blood pressure does not decline you unless you were diagnosed before 35 for the diabetes and take insulin, or if you had blood pressure diagnosed and then it was before 30. You don't get just automatically declined just for having diabetes and blood pressure. So don't be afraid to put yes, especially when you put no, it says, hey, wrong answer. You got to move it to the yes because that's what it says on the record. Okay? Does that make sense? So Rachel, what happens when a patient has an incorrect diagnosis and was incorrectly treated for a time, then moved and treated by another doctor and receive a different diagnosis that will change coverage acceptance? That's an excellent question. So Rachel, in that scenario, I would not recommend you to do an instant decision application. The reason why is it's cut and dry, right? Oh, yes or no questions with instant decision because they're basing it on the MIB and the client's answer on the application. When it's a more complicated situation like that, and we had those clients before where a doctor misdiagnosed them and they had to switch a doctor, and then the doctor says, "Oh, you actually don't have that." So when that happens, then this is a couple ways you can go about this. One, you can have the client to go back to the original doctor who misdiagnosed the client and have the MIB to redact that, get that out of the record. That can take few months. Sometimes it takes 6 months to get that resolved, but that has to be done by the original doctor that coded and put it into your record. That is an uphill battle, though. I'll give you a heads up because they have to admit that they were wrong and they have to get that taken out to be taken out of your MIB forever. If not, then it still shows up there, even if it was a misdiagnosis. Second way you can go about this is that there's no way the doctor will do that or a doctor's not to be found. Then you might have to do a fully underwritten application where you do a blood work, urine work, and to kind of be an open book and say, hey, I don't have this and my blood and urine should all be fine. And that was a misdiagnosis and have an explanation on the application on the agent like remarks agent comment section. You can kind of maybe go into a little more detail what happened, then that could potentially get the client approved. But if you just apply for a non-medical product, there's a big chance that they just see the diagnosis or the coding on the MIB and decline the client just based on that. Okay. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, doctors don't say they're wrong. Yeah, exactly. It's true. I only were able to help two clients to get it removed ever. And one client, she's like 67-year-old, and she was only being prescribed with high blood pressure medications, but one of the blood pressure medication was carvedilol. Carvedilol is a blood pressure, but also helps with the heart as well. So it could also help with the congestive heart failure and some other, maybe some irregular heartbeats and things like that, or AFib. So the doctor prescribed that, but I guess doctor might have said she might have a heart issue. I'm not quite sure how that happened. But when I applied for the client, I was thinking, oh, she's 67 and only has a blood pressure, so this should be an easy application. And she got instantly denied. And I applied for another one, got instantly denied. And when I went back and asked her to get the MIB record, and when we pulled it out, it actually showed that potential congestive heart failure and other things in there. So she had to go back to the doctor and yell at him, get that redacted. It took like 6 months and she was able to finally get a coverage after that. But it is a very long-winded process, so just be aware of that. Okay, any other questions? Okay, so this is the really America. I love their products. Application, you don't really ding the clients the MIB, and you can find out in the first 5 minutes if it's even worth it to do an application, or they'll just stop the application right there if they'll decline the client. So that's why we like them. So should be on your top three list of the products you offer, whether it's term, IUL, or final expense. And by the way, a lot of the competitors, they cannot even offer this anymore. Americo cut off a lot of the IMOs who have a very low persistency ratio. They tell us Symmetry has one of the highest in the nation, like 88% persistency rate on 9 to 12 months. I mean, that's unheard of. Other companies were having 50 to 57% persistency. That means at 100 clients who are issued a policy, about 40 of them cancel the policy in the first 9 to 12 months. That's a horrible record. So they're cutting off a lot of the IMOs who don't have a quality business. So it's really an honor to be able to continuously offer this. So yeah, utilize it because price tend to be one of the best in the country for IULs and especially final expense. Okay. And lastly, one thing I didn't mention, this one. How often do you check your blood sugar level? If you put never, it's a decline. If you're diabetic and you say, hey, I never check blood sugar level, you can be declined. So I recommend you to put daily or weekly as an answer. All right. Okay. So we'll go ahead and stop the recording.